So in this video, we're going to talk about factoring trinomials with a leading coefficient of 1. So I like to teach this with an OC method. So when we talk about a quadratic, we're talking about something that's written as ax squared plus bx plus c. Ax squared plus bx plus c. In this case, all of our a's are going to be 1. We're going to talk about what if this number's not 1 in another video. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply a times c together, and we're going to get some kind of number. And then we're going to think about how can I factor that number? What are the different possibilities? And the goal is to choose the one that's going to add up to what the middle term is. So let's look at a few examples. We have x squared plus 7x plus 12. So our a here is 1, and our c is 12. So we have 1 times 12, which is 12. And that's what we're going to try to break down. What times what is going to give me a 12? Well, we have 1 times 12, or 1 times 12, or negative 1 times negative 12. The sign's going to be really important, and we'll see that in a few other examples. Or we have 3 times 4, or negative 3 times negative 4. Or we have 2 times 6, or negative 2 times negative 6. So which combination, if I add the numbers together, will give me that 7? Well, it's not 1 plus 12 because that's 13. And negative 1 plus negative 12 is negative 13. 3 plus 4 is going to work because that's going to give me the 7. I can't use negative 3 and negative 4 because that gives me a negative 7 and I need a positive. And then the 2 and 6s aren't going to work either. So you're only going to have one option when you look at this. All the factors, which one's going to add to this middle term, and then the more you do this, the more quickly you're going to be able to find that. So then our next step is going to be the rewrite. We're going to rewrite that 7x as 3x plus 4x. Okay, so I didn't change the problem. I just wrote it, that 7x, that middle term, differently. And the reason we do that is so we can factor by grouping. So I'm going to group the first two terms together, and then I'm going to group the second two terms together. So when I group the first two together, we can see they have an x in common. I'm going to factor it out, and that's going to leave me with an x plus 3. And then the last two terms have a 4 in common, and that's going to leave me, if I factor it out, with an x plus 3. And notice that these two terms have an x plus 3 in common. And then that's going to leave me with some leftovers, x plus 4. So this guy factors into x plus 3 times x plus 4. Now, it doesn't matter whether I wrote 3x plus 4x or 4x plus 3x. So let's do a what if. What if we would have written this as x squared plus 4x plus 3x plus 12? We're still going to be able to get it to factor. This is still a 7x in the middle. The first two terms have an x in common, leaving us with x plus 4. The second two have a 3 in common, leaving us with x plus 4. And you can see now we have x plus 4 in common, leaving us with leftovers x plus 3. Okay, and it doesn't matter which order I'm multiplying, I'm going to get the same answer either way. It's the commutative property of multiplication. It says a times b is equal to b times a. And we see that when we do our multiplication tables, because something like 3 times 5 is the same thing as 5 times 3. Let's look at another one. We have x squared minus 9x plus 20. So we're going to use our AC method. So that's going to be 1 times 20. 1 comes from the number in front of the x squared. 20 is our c, and that's going to give us 20. We're going to think about what can I multiply together to get a positive 20. Well, I could use 1 and 20, or negative 1 and negative 20. I could use 2 and 10, or negative 2 and negative 10. And then we have 4 times 5, and negative 4 times negative 5. So if you add these combinations together, which one will add to give me that negative 9? It's going to be this guy, the negative 4 and negative 5. So now we're going to do a rewrite step. So this is minus 4x minus 5x as our rewrite for negative 9. And then we're going to group. These have an x in common, leaving us with x minus 4. So the negative 5x plus 20, I'm going to factor out a negative 5, leaving me with x minus 4. Okay, if I would have factored out a positive 5, that would have left me with a negative x plus 4. Notice my signs don't match from that first group, so that's how I know I need to factor a negative out. And then from these two, they have an x minus 4 group in common, and that's going to leave us with an x minus 5. So this factors in x minus 4 times x minus 5. Okay, let's look at another one. They all work the same way. X squared plus 3x minus 10. We're going to use our AC method. So 1 times negative 10 is a negative 10. What can I multiply together to get a negative 10? Well, I could use 1 and negative 10, or negative 1 and positive 10. We could use 2 and negative 5, or negative 2 and 5. I want the combination that's going to add to a positive 3, and that's going to be that negative 2 and 5. So then we're going to do a rewrite. So x squared minus 2x plus 5x minus 10. That middle still adds up to 3x. Group the first two, factor an x out. That leaves us with x minus 2. Group the second two, factor a 5 out, leaving us with x minus 2. So we have x minus 2 as our group that they have in common. Leftovers are x plus 5. So we have x minus 2 times x plus 5. And if we wanted to check it, we could just multiply everything back out. And when we do, we should end up with what we started with. Let's do 1 or 2 more. So we have x squared minus 2x minus 24. So AC is going to be 1 times a negative 24, which is a negative 24. And we're going to think about all the combinations. So I'm going to start with 2. 2 and negative 12, or negative 2 and positive 12. Let's try 3 and 8. So negative 3 and 8, or 3 and negative 8. So nothing's working so far. What about 4 and 6? 4 and negative 6, or negative 4 and positive 6. So these are 2 units apart. I want the negative to get a negative 2 when I add. So I want the 4 and negative 6. So our rewrite, oops, you have x squared plus 4x minus 6x minus 24. First two terms have an x in common. Second two terms have a negative 6 in common. And then those two have an x plus 4 group in common, leaving us with x minus 6. So there's our factored form. All right, let's look at our last one. We have x to the 4th minus 19x cubed plus 84x squared. So if we look at this, every term has an x squared in common. So we're going to start by factoring out that GCF. That's going to leave me with an x squared minus 19x plus 84. So now we're going to ask, can we break this down even more? So let's use a times c. So we're going to do 1 times 84, which is 84. And we're going to think about what kind of things can we multiply together to get an 84. So we're going to have 2 and 24, or negative 2 and negative 24. And those are really too far apart. We want a 19 here. So we're just going to keep trying things until we get to that number. So let's see if we can use 7. So we have 7 and negative 7 and 12, or negative 7 and negative 12. Well, you can see how the negative 7 and negative 12 will add together to get that negative 19. So now we're going to do a rewrite. I'm going to use a bracket here. just to show that I need to do a little bit more work with this one. So I'm going to group those first two terms. They have an x in common. I'm going to group the second two terms. They have a negative 12 in common. And then now these two have an x minus 7 in column. So notice that x squared is just being multiplied by whatever is left over here. I'm going to factor out that x minus 7. That's going to leave me with an x minus 12. So this guy factors in the x squared times x minus 7 times x minus 12. Now, if it's something that we can't factor any further, then we call this prime. So let's look at an example. Let's say we have x squared plus 5x plus 8, and we're asking, can we factor it? So let's use our AC method. So it's going to be 1 times 8, which is 8. We're going to think about what can we multiply together to get an 8. Well, we have 1 and 8, negative 1, negative 8, 2 and 4, negative 2, and negative 4. None of those combinations will give me that 5 in the middle. So this guy we cannot factor, which means this is a prime quadratic. Prime just means it can't be factored. Okay, let's look at example 2. We have x squared minus x minus 3. We want to know, can we factor it? So we're going to use that AC method. 1 times a negative 3 is going to give us a negative 3. What can we multiply together? Negative 1 and 3, or 1 and negative 3. And that's really the only thing we can multiply together. But none of those will add up to that negative 1 in the middle. So this one is prime also. Okay, just a couple more. Anytime you start with factoring, you want to ask yourself, is there something that you could factor out of every term? We have 3x squared plus 15x plus 18. Notice everything has a 3 in common. If I factor it out, that's going to leave me with x squared plus 5x plus 6. So I'm going to use the AC method on the x squared plus 5x plus 6. So AC is going to be 1 times 6, which is 6. And I could think about 2 and 3 as my winning combination there. So just like before, I'm going to use a bracket here. I'm going to rewrite the 5x as 2x plus 3x. I'm going to factor an x out of the first two terms. And I'm going to factor a 3 out of the second two terms. And then those have an x plus 2 in common. And leftovers will be x plus 3. So this factors into 3 times x plus 2 times x plus 3. And this is where you may want to pause the video and try this one. So I have 5x squared minus 5x minus 30. Everything has a 5 in common, and if I factor it out, I'm left with x squared minus x minus 6. AC gives me 6. So I could use 1 and, it's a negative 6. I can use 1 and negative 6 or negative 1 and 6, but that doesn't give me that negative 1 I need. What about 2 and negative 3 or negative 2 and 3? It looks like 2 and negative 3 is going to be your winning combination. So I'm going to write that as x squared plus 2x minus 3x minus 6. I can factor an x out of the first two terms, leaving me with x plus 2. I can factor a negative 3 out of the second two terms, leaving me with an x plus 2. So now those groups have an x plus 2 in common, leaving us with x minus 3. So it factors into 5 times x plus 2 times x minus 3.